Avisi took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She began, her words cutting through the murmurs like a knife. If you spare my brother, I will cure the prince in 3 weeks. I will heal him from his illness that has baffled all healers far and wide. She declared this confidently, knowing very well that she had no healing abilities of any sort. Everyone in the crowd was shocked because she was known as the village nuisance. Welcome to Tales of Muse. Here, we dive into the enchanting world of fictional tales, exploring stories that spark the imagination. Please like this video and subscribe for much more interesting ones to come. Avisi's Tale. In the vast kingdom of Mbala, nestled deep in the heart of Africa, lived Avisi, a spirited young woman of 20. Her life was marked by the unconventional ways of her small family. Unlike most families in the village, Avisi's father was lenient, and her younger brother, Tand, was notorious for his mischief. The people of Mbala often frowned upon Avisi's family. The village girls followed strict traditions, but Avisi was different. She loved exploring, laughing, and dreaming of adventures far beyond the village borders. She was so outspoken and bold that the villagers regarded her as misbehaved and uncultured. All the villagers didn't want their sons and daughters to stay with Avisi, so she didn't have any close friends in the village. But Avisi wasn't at all bothered by this. She enjoyed her own company, often talking to herself and laughing at her own stories. Her sounds would normally fill the forest as she sang with the birds and danced around. Her father, a wise man with a kind heart, allowed her the freedom to be herself. Tand, on the other hand, was a handful, often getting into trouble that Avisi had to bail him out of. He was also another one the villagers didn't want around their children. One fateful day, Tand's recklessness reached a boiling point. He hunted and killed a rare lion breed, a sacred creature protected by the laws of the kingdom. No one was allowed to get close to these creatures without the king's permission, let alone hunt them. This was a grave offense. The king, enraged by this act, ordered Tand's execution. The village was abuzz with the news. Everyone knew about Tand's reckless nature, and while some were remorseful, others believed he deserved his fate. Avisi and her father were heartbroken. They couldn't imagine life without Tand. Their family wouldn't be complete without him. If Tand was executed, it would be as if all of them had died. Avisi couldn't allow this to happen. She had to find a way to save her brother, even though their king was known for his unyielding nature. But she knew he had one weakness, his love for his son. As the hour of execution approached, Avisi's heart pounded with fear and determination. She was ready to risk it all. With Tand on the brink of death, Avisi stood in the middle of the crowd and made a bold declaration before the king and the entire village. If you spare my brother's life, she announced, I will cure the prince within 3 weeks. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Avisi had no able skills, no knowledge of medicine, and the prince's ailment had baffled the kingdom's finest healers for years. How could the village nuisance, having no knowledge about herbal medicine, cure a man who had been bedridden for years? The king looked at the bold girl standing in the crowd. He didn't believe in her capabilities, but he was a father hoping for a miracle. Desperate to save his son, he agreed to Avisi's plea, though he was skeptical. He decreed that if Avisi failed, her entire family would face execution. Bound by her promise, Avisi was granted access to the palace, while her father and brother remained in the village under strict watch. Before departing for the palace, Avisi had a chance to speak to her family. Her father was worried about her. Avisi spoke to her father and Tand. I don't know how to cure the prince, she admitted, but I've bought us 3 weeks. If Tand had died today, we would have followed him. Now, we have 3 weeks to live, to do everything we've ever wanted. Enjoy these days, and I'll do the same in the palace. After they all agreed to the plan, Avisi left for the palace. With a mixture of fear and resolve, Avisi entered the palace, determined to make the most of her time. She requested to stay in the prince's chambers, claiming she needed to be close to him at all times. In actuality, what she wanted was privacy and freedom to enjoy her days without any disturbances and suspicion from the palace workers. If she was discovered as an insolent who had no idea of what she was doing, her entire family would be executed before the 3 weeks ended. The king, eager to try anything, agreed and provided her with every comfort in the palace. Avesi was given everything she needed to spend her last days on earth like a queen. Avesi spent her days in the prince's room, not knowing what to do about his condition. Instead of fretting over remedies, she danced, sang, and told stories, enjoying the luxury of the palace. Since she was alone with only the prince, she would converse with the bedridden man as if he were listening to her. She told him everything she could. She relished the fine meals, the soft bed, and the freedom from the villagers' judgment. The prince, bedridden and unconscious, was unaware of Avesi's antics. Yet, something miraculous was happening. Avesi's lively presence, her laughter, and her joy began to permeate the prince's subconscious. Her stories and songs stirred memories and emotions within him. Slowly, he started to heal. His pallor improved, his breathing steadied, and a flicker of life returned to his eyes, but he still wasn't able to wake up. Avesi was so absorbed in enjoying her days that she didn't notice the changes in the prince's health. As her days of freedom drew closer to an end, she continued her adventures. By the end of the 3 weeks, Avesi willingly walked out of the prince's chamber ready to face her fate. She admitted to the king that she had failed in her mission, and the prince was still bedridden and unresponsive. The king, furious at being deceived, ordered the execution of Avesi and her family. As they were brought together for the final time, they embraced happily because they were glad to see each other. This time they were mentally prepared for their doom, ready to face their fate united. The villagers mocked Avesi and her family. Because of her stupid declaration, all of them were going to die today. If only she was quiet and reserved like other girls in the village. They mocked her father for permitting her uncultured behavior. The family of 3 weren't at all affected by their words, they were just happy to have lived happily these past few weeks. They were ready to die together. Just as the executioner raised his sword, a palace guard rushed in, followed by the palace physician. "Wait," the physician shouted. "The prince has woken up. He is asking for the woman who filled his chambers with song and laughter," the physician declared. Everyone was so shocked by the news. The prince had suddenly woken up. How was that possible? And the woman the physician mentioned was none other than Avesi, the village nuisance. The king, astonished, ordered Avesi to be brought before the prince. When she entered his room, the prince was sitting up, a faint smile on his lips. "I heard your stories," he said weakly. "I felt your joy. You brought me back to life." Avesi and the prince exchanged a look of understanding and gratitude. The king, overwhelmed with relief and joy, rescinded the execution order. Avesi's family was spared, and the village celebrated the unexpected miracle. From that day on, Avesi was no longer seen as a nuisance. She was hailed as a hero, the girl whose laughter and spirit had healed the prince. With the prince slowly recovering, the king asked Avesi to stay and take care of him until he regained full health. Each day was filled with laughter, stories, and songs, and as the prince's strength grew, so did their bond. Avesi found herself drawn to the prince, her feelings deepening with each passing day. She had never felt this way before, and it scared her. She knew the king would never approve of a match between a prince and a village girl. She also believed that the prince could never truly be interested in someone like her. One night, overwhelmed by her feelings, Avesi decided to leave the palace. She couldn't bear the thought of her heart breaking if the prince didn't feel the same way or if the king forbade their union. When the prince woke up the next morning and found Avesi gone, he was heartbroken. He searched for her everywhere, calling out her name, but she was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and the prince's heart ached with longing for the girl who had brought light into his life. The king, noticing his son's distress, decided it was time to find him a bride. He prepared a grand wedding banquet, inviting the most beautiful princesses from neighboring kingdoms. The prince, however, was not interested. He attended the banquet out of duty, but his heart was elsewhere. When the time came for him to choose a bride, he stood before the assembled guests. The bold prince stands tall and regal before his people, exuding an aura of unwavering confidence. His shoulders are squared, and his head is held high, projecting strength and authority. His piercing eyes scan the crowd with a mix of determination and assurance, reflecting his readiness to lead. Clad in an ornate, finely crafted tunic adorned with symbols of royalty, his posture is steady and imposing, radiating a sense of power and protection, instilling trust and respect in those who gaze upon him. The prince thanked everyone in attendance for coming. It was his first time being introduced to his people and addressing them. Today was a special occasion. The people met their prince and a potential princess, the future king and queen of the kingdom. When it came to that, the prince addressed the king. "Father, I ask that you choose a bride for me, but on one condition," the prince stated firmly. The king felt a surge of joy at his son's trust in him. It was a great honor. The king had earlier been afraid that the prince wouldn't accept his arrangements to find a wife for him. He had thought his son had developed a soft spot for a village girl. The king had even refused to allow the palace guards and maids to help the prince locate the village girl once she escaped. Although he was grateful to the village girl for bringing his son, the heir to the kingdom, back to life, he didn't want his only child to marry a commoner with no knowledge of leadership. After the king vowed to deliver the woman his heart desired in front of everyone in the kingdom, the prince began to lay out his condition. "The woman I would love to take as a wife must have eyes that sparkle with joy, a voice that sings with the wind, laughter that dances like flames, and a smile that can light up the darkest room. She must have the face of the only girl I see when I close my eyes. She must have her scent, and her voice must be able to keep me awake even in my sleep." The hall fell silent as the prince described a person that could not be replaced in any way. Even if there were ladies who had her voice and joy, they most definitely didn't have her face. Everyone knew who the prince was describing. The news of the bold village girl who shared her joys and brought the near-death prince to life had spread far and wide. It was like a miracle healing. From the prince's words, they could tell she had managed to heal his heart and claim it. Avesi was in the crowd when she heard the prince describe the woman of his dreams. The description was so detailed that even she knew it could only be her he spoke of. Avesi had thought these feelings that burned in her heart were only hers. She didn't know that the prince shared them too. She was so touched by his declaration, she couldn't believe that she, a local village girl, managed to gain the prince's favor. The king could no longer deny his son the woman his heart yearned for. The prince was clearly in love with the healer of his heart. Some villagers who had recognized Avesi in the crowd immediately brought her out. Avesi had carried a lot of favor in their hearts. They knew her as the lady who healed their prince in a way never heard of, a selfless girl who would do anything for the people she loved, including risking her life, and a carefree woman who wasn't afraid to stand out as different despite people's scrutiny. That was a very admirable quality for a leader and a queen. Soon enough, the grand royal marriage was arranged, and the whole kingdom celebrated. It was a royal marriage like no other. That was the biggest occasion in the kingdom's history. Due to the bravery of a young girl, a tragedy had been turned into a blessing for the kingdom. Avesi's story led to the far and wide recognition of joy and laughter as strong healing powers for the body, but especially for the heart. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to this channel for many more exhilarating tales of muse to come.